In this next video, we're going to be talking about obedience to authority. Now, in general terms, being obedient to authority, if that authority figure has rational and reasonable rules, can be a nice, orderly effect that everyone can fall into. However, if that authority figure is a bad actor and doesn't have people's best interest in mind, we could really move into some bad decision making. And so back in the 1960s, there's a link here for the YouTube clip talking about Milgram's experiment. He was a Jewish researcher based in the US who was trying to understand if World War II, the atrocities of World War II, if that was an isolated thing for the Germans in an isolated time, or if this was something that would be more widespread to other cultures and other time periods. So this experiment out here was actually pretty out there for its time. And because of this experiment where they're using shocks to individuals and a little bit of trauma to people, it's the reason why we don't do this as researchers anymore. And it's also a reason that we have all sorts of measures and paperwork in place just to roll out a very simple survey to individuals for their own protection. And it all starts with this experiment. And so just to give you a recap, because I do expect that you would jump in and watch that video as it provides a lot of insight. This is going to be a debrief. So if you need to pause me here, watch the video, come on back. I'll wait for you. But when you come back, I want to ask you some debriefing questions here. Number one, in the study, how many people received the maximum shock? So in other words, what percentage of the groups in this experiment went all the way to the end, despite the person on the other side of the wall yelling, "I have a heart condition, this is not right, somebody get me out of here." The authority figure says, "I'm telling you to keep going." How many people actually continued to do that all the way to the maximum voltage? And the answer here is 60 to 65% went all the way to the maximum, and that was 450 volts. Number two, how many people or what percentage of participants actually gave the initial shock? So how many people they didn't just step away, essentially? And the answer is 100%. Gave at least one shock to somebody else. And so this experiment proved that people are likely to follow orders even harmful ones, when given by an accepted authority figure. So I found this really interesting because obviously this happened back in the 60s, and there have been a lot of additional measures put in place that we don't do this anymore. So my natural question was, all right, man, things have really evolved since the 1960s. We've become way more developed around the world. How would this still work in today's world? Do you think people will likely follow orders, even harmful ones, when given by an accepted authority figure? And so you can see the world around us and probably say, yeah. And I will add that recent studies that are different versions of this, they're a little more mild. they've actually found that this number, they don't give 450, it goes up to, I think, about 150. But they found that now it's around 75 to 80% of participants will still do the maximum. So even more people are participating, even though the maximum shock is not as much. So something that's a little bit concerning, but also still very relevant here as we have this obedience to authority. All right, a little more lights now. We're going to shift gears here, and we're going to talk about the herding effect and then wisdom of crowds. So I like to now shift into a lighter mode here, because this wisdom of crowds that we talked about in our bias section is that in aggregate, we may not all know the answer, but we as a crowd can point somebody in the right direction. So maybe if you watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the old TV show, when you phone the crowd and it's something that they don't really know, but the crowd somehow knows, like 70% of the people say it's a certain answer, they have a real tendency of being right. So, and together, the majority of the crowd sometimes knows something that somebody else doesn't know. So I think about this with if you're walking to a stadium. So you're going to a football game or a soccer game or any big stadium concert, and everyone's kind of going in the same direction as they're heading into the stadium, and you're not familiar with the city. So what do? You're going to follow your GPS, or do you do what I do? You follow the crowd. I want to know where the people are. Even if I'm looking at sometimes a restaurant down a busy street and it's a random Tuesday, and I realize, hey, there seems to be a lot of energy or commotion over here. What's going on? So following that crowd, I realize, oh, I know why. It's $1 taco day or $1 beer day, and it actually tends to be a really good experience. So this wisdom of crowds is in conflict with groupthink. And this is the idea that the idea that large groups of people are collectively smarter than individual experts when it comes to problem solving, decision making, and predicting. So this is basically putting our groupthink into a positive light. So remember, we talked about groupthink. If we have conformity, then it starts being a negative thing because everyone just gravitates to that one person. But we want to remember that there is power in the wisdom of crowds if we're all able to have our own opinion, where we can help with problem solving, decision making, and predicting. So just want to add in that on the back end of our obedience to authority section, which was a little bit dark. Now, final moment here is understanding some of our herding behavior. So once again, we're trying to follow the crowd, and once again, I take this back to a negative spot, because usually our herding is following the behavior of others and ignoring our own information. And ignoring our own information. I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I feel like we should be doing something else. Now, if we're going to that ballpark and I'm not sure, then this herding can actually help me. So again, this can be a good or bad thing, but oftentimes the behavior of others, we ignore our own information, can lead us into bad decisions. So this is sometimes in finance where we're trend chasing, or we're buying products that we don't really know what they are. Some people are buying a bunch of options and futures and not just Bitcoin, but other cryptocurrencies that we don't really understand. And they're not really understanding it on their own. They're just following the behavior of others. And somebody else posted on Facebook that they made all this money, so I'm going to do this myself. Usually by the time you're reacting on this information, you are too late to the party. So just remember that this herding mentality can be good sometimes and can help us, but oftentimes can negatively affect us in our decisions. All right, so we're laying that nice foundation of all the different ways that we can be good decision makers or bad decision makers. We've got one more piece to talk about before we get into the actual savings and financial behaviors. So keep going. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.